don't get me wrong. I love being home again. It's nice having all of my meals catered to me as opposed to having to cook them on my own. But it's weird, you know. Like it's how do I put it? It's like being a high schooler again, but with the responsibilities of being an adult.
Hilarious.
You know, like I try to leave the house after 9 o'clock, and it feels illegal.
Yeah.
You know?
So wait, walk the audience through. So you know, name, where where you've been, where you went to school, both college and high school. I mean, you know, who are you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my name is Rohan Natar.
Yeah.
I was born and raised here all 18 years, decided I'd had enough of good weather, and I decided to leave here and move to the Midwest for college, where I went to Indiana University in Bloomington for 4 years. Studied business there, finance and business analytics. Got that dual degree to make my parents happy. And graduated. I've got a job in Chicago now, but with COVID, of course.
So wait, I have to stop. You're the first, and I think the only student I've ever had. So there's actually two things that make you unique. You're the only student I've ever had that has passed up UC Berkeley to go to an out-of-state. I think that's an accurate statement, minus the Ivy Leagues. Right. So the only reason
it's a different breed, right?
Most of our students, the only reason why they would leave or pass UC Berkeley is typically to go to say like a Harvard or Columbia or something like that.
Right.
Even then, it's actually kind of a toss-up. They're like, should I stay and get that public tuition or whatever. Number two, I think you're historically the only student to actually commit to IU.
Really?
Ever, yeah.
Really?
We've had tons of students get in, but they've never gone.
That's a shame, man. It's great. I love it. I can't say enough good things.
So I think something that's really cool that maybe we can just start with, which is like, how? Like, why did you pass up Berkeley and to IU? Because I think most students would be so envious of your position.
I mean, do you remember what it was like for me? That was a big decision. I went over that for a long time. So I mean, it was funny too because I remember the day. Like, I remember getting that acceptance. Like, I remember seeing the thing.
From who?
No, it was like the online portal, right? I remember that there's that Google sheet that I don't know if it's still around, but there's a Google sheet that we used to have where people would leak the admission release deadlines, and so we all knew when Berkeley was going to drop, and none of us had interest in being around each other in school, checking our admittances or rejections. So we were just like, let's just go to the park and have some fun. It was second semester of senior year, probably mid-March, something like that. And we were out there from 3 to 6 o'clock, just hanging out in the park, having a good time. We all went home.
I had no idea.
And it was funny too, because the week leading up to this, everyone's even if I get in, I'm not gonna go. Right?
Berkeley.
Everyone's just I don't.
You guys trying to play it down though, right?
Exactly.
The truth is, people probably
everybody wanted to go. Yeah,
exactly.
And so we go home. I go home. I get online. I showered. I'd completely forgotten they were coming out, and I opened up our Facebook chat, and people were they were talking about how they got their admission statuses.
Yeah.
And I went online and I opened it up, completely expecting a rejection email, and they have this little thing where if you get in on the online portal, they throw a little confetti thing at you, and that popped up on my screen and surprised me. And I didn't understand what was happening for a good 3 or 4 seconds, and then I was just holy shit, I got in.
Wait, but the context here is that you had gotten accepted and rejected from various UCs, right? If I remember correctly, you had gotten, if I'm not mistaken, you had been rejected from, I think it was a UC Davis or something like that.
No, so it was, I applied to 4, right?
Okay,
I applied to Berkeley, LA, San Diego, and Irvine. Right?
Yeah. Irvine.
And the reasoning being, I wanted to study finance, right? And those are the schools in California that offered strong economics programs, which I didn't love doing, but I was all right, that's close enough to finance that it would make a competitive choice for another finance school. So those are the 4 I got applied to. I got rejected from LA.
Okay.
I got waitlisted at San Diego and Irvine, and then I got into Berkeley.
And so if I remember
I went 1 for 4, and the 1 was Berkeley.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember when you got those first 3 results, because I think Berkeley came out last, and you were it's just not happening. You're
I was it's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Yeah, it's over. And then you got in.
I was beyond stunned, to say the least.
So walk us, or walk me through, what was the logic in your mind? How did you ultimately say, okay, not taking Berkeley? How hard was that decision, by the way? And then also, how did you ultimately say, okay, I'm gonna go to IU?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was equally, to address the decision, I think it was equally a hard decision and an easy decision. There were parts of it that made it easy and parts of it that made it really hard. I think the logic overall was, as I mentioned just before, I wanted to do a finance degree. And IU's business program was, I think at the time, ranked like 8th or something like that in the country for finance. And so that was a big thing. And I'd already gotten direct admittance to to the Kelly School of Business.
Right.
Great school, by the way. Just shameless plug. And I wasn't, directly accepted into Haas, which was a big difference. And even if I got into Haas, I don't remember if this is accurate anymore, but I don't think Berkeley offers, or Haas offers, a pure finance degree.
No.
Right? It's like a concentration, but you're like an econ major, business major, something like
business
that.
Business admin major.
Right. So that wasn't something I was particularly wanting to study. So there was a big difference there already. Additionally, people would be like, oh, like you're moving across like the country, like isn't that a big deal? You won't know anyone there. Like I was already covered there too, because I actually have family that lives just outside, about an hour away, just outside of Indianapolis. And my cousin was the same age as me. He was already committed to IU, and a bunch of his friends that I knew that I was pretty good friends with were also committed to IU. So I had a good group of like 4 or 5 people that I knew going into it.
There you go.
There was one older classman who had graduated from American in 2015 that I was really close to, who's also at IU. So I had a couple of friends out there already. That wasn't an issue. And I had a family friend from 2014 that was also
And your
there.
clothes are still in
my clothes are all still in Bloomington.
Exactly.
Not in Bloomington, but they're in my unknown house. My stuff is split between 2
As a
places
result
right
of
now.
COVID, you had to come back, and you haven't been able to. So you're running your 1 of 6 T-shirts.
One of 6 is that. This is just the first one out the closet.
That's awesome.
Laundry was done yesterday. This is just the first
So wait,
one.
but you're starting work though, right?
Yeah.
No, you just started work.
I did.
Congratulations.
I did. This week. Thank you. I'm pretty excited about that.
So where is that company based? Is that based here, or is that based over there?
So it's based
or
in
somewhere else.
Yeah. So there's 4 like office locations: Philly, Boston. There's one in Virginia just outside of DC called Tyson's Corner, and there's one in Chicago, which is the one that I'm working for.
Got it.
And I think their headquarters is in Philadelphia.
Got it. How did you get that job? So you're going to school at IU. Was it connection? Was it the school? Was it a job fair? Was it just a post on Indeed? I mean, what
It was a mix of a couple of those things. So IU generally it's got one of the better business programs in the Midwest, and so as a result, a lot of firms from Chicago tend to recruit at a lot of these schools, like Purdue, Michigan, IU, like Vanderbilt, like that area, U Chicago. They'll come down and see a lot of students there. So we have a really large pull to Chicago in general. A lot of students from IU either are from there to begin with, or end up going there for work because it's the closest big city. And so we get a lot of people from Chicago that come out to recruit. And I actually heard about it because my roommate interviewed there. He went through their interview process, liked the company, got a job offer, but didn't actually want to work there because it wasn't what he really wanted to do after graduation. And
what did he want to do?
That's a good question. I don't think he had it figured out yet. But he knew he didn't want to do that.
So to clarify, what you're going to be doing is wealth management, right?
Yeah, wealth management, comprehensive financial planning.
Which for most people, if they don't understand, is basically where to allocate your money in a wise way to help it grow.
Exactly. How to get the most out for what you put in.
Correct, yeah. Because a lot of people have their money sitting in banks, just literally deflating,
deflating with cash,
Yeah, so that's awesome, man.
I'm enjoying it so far.
What was it like going to school in the Midwest?
It was totally different.
So
completely different.
Let's talk about that. So Calicut. Right, just like me. You go to. So I was in Kentucky just last year before COVID hit, and it was a different world. Landing in Nashville, driving 2.5, 3 hours. I think it was northbound to Murray, Kentucky, where I was born. Just different world, different mindset, different accent,
It's a totally different place.
I mean, so I get a feel, but what was it like for you? I mean, coming from Fremont, California, right? I mean,
this is how I like to put it, right? At my internship last year, they asked us to do this like slide about us that we present to like all the other members of the office, and up there on my slide, I have a bunch of pictures of my friends and I from high school, and I have a couple pictures of my friends and I in college. And I was standing up there, and honestly, this joke could have gone very poorly. But I was like, I grew up in the Bay Area, where, as you can see, everyone looked like me, and then moved out to Indiana, where, as you can see, everyone did not.
And that joke went well.
It did.
Okay, good.
They enjoyed that one. They enjoyed that one. But honestly, I think that's a really good way of putting it. We live in. It is diverse, right? But it's diverse from a national perspective, right? We have a different kind of homogeneity. We're a different kind of homogeneous.
You pronounced that correctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're a different kind of homogeneous here.
The SAT vocab setting worked.
It's still in there. It's somewhere in there. It's kicking dust up there, but it's in there.
That worked. That was good. Yeah.
But it's interesting because we get used to being called like diverse and ethnic or whatever. But I mean, we grow up the same way. We're still in that bubble where we know like it's different cultures than what other kids are used to, which maybe makes us a little bit more attuned globally. We've got family overseas, which a lot of people don't. But at the same time, you're still in that bubble of you only know what you were raised around. And that was also part of the reason I wanted to leave the Bay Area, and why I chose IU over Berkeley was, honestly, I figured I kind of wanted to see what the rest of the world was like, and I wanted to get out of that bubble that we're in here, that mindset that we're all kind of raised into, and I wanted to see what the rest of the world is like, and I'm so glad I did.
And what'd you learn? Like, what if you were to sum it up in, I don't know, a few points? Like not including the joke you just mentioned, which is I guess you can say. It's a physical observation, but what did
the way we grow up, it's completely different here compared to like the rest of. There's probably a couple pockets around America that are similar to how we grow up here, but the vast majority of kids don't.
How though? Like what's different? Like,
I think a great way to. I remember going through high school, there was a very clear layout of the summers and what I was expected to do with each one, right? The first freshman year summer, you can have fun, right? You're like 14, you don't know anything.
Sure.
You're just having fun, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sophomore year summer is SAT prep. Excel, elite.
Sure.
It's that life.
Or junior year.
Or junior year, depending on how you do it. We did it all, we all did it sophomore year.
Yeah.
Then junior year, you find some like job to work, internship, something that's related to your actual career.
Yeah.
And then senior year, you can have fun again before you go off to college. And I remember telling people about that when I was like, especially like doing SAT prep, like going to a place and paying money to, no shade to Elite or Excel.
Excel, yeah, sure.
But the idea of going and paying and being like locked in that classroom 4 hours a day, 10 weeks of your summer is completely foreign to kids, right? Like they all self-study, they all like, it's just different, I want to say the kind of, the mindset that we have is a double-edged sword, for sure. It's extremely good if you can be successful with it, but I think it grinds a lot of people down. And out there, they focus a lot more on like chasing your passions and your dreams and like what you're actually interested in versus like, oh, what looks good on X resume.
So if I'm hearing you right, the grind, right? The culture here in the Bay Area and California and other pockets, I would say affluent suburbia is perhaps along the coastlines, right? I think they're good at what? I think creating hard workers. They're good at, for students who get through it successfully.
You have a good work ethic.
Yeah, good work ethic. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. But you're right. I mean, every day I encounter students who are stressed out, burnt out. And, it's interesting. It's almost like, I feel like there's a sense of lack of compassion for those people. It's just like you either made it or you did.
Or you don't, And
I think that's such a nasty, it's a rough way. It's a rough life.
And it's interesting too, because I remember, so as I mentioned earlier, I was a direct admit to our business school. And there are kids who don't get directly admitted and they try to apply at the end of freshman year, like you would see with like HOTS, except it's freshman year, not sophomore.
Sure,
And it's funny because you hear, once you're a sophomore, right, and the kids who have been either rejected or accepted into the school, you start meeting kids that are in our School of Public Environmental Affairs, something like that, and they'll say like, oh, like I was like pre-Kelly, but like, like it was so toxic in there, like it was so competitive, and I'm sitting there, they were like, it wasn't for me, and I'll be like, I've met like 14-year-olds that know more about competition than what you just went through your last year of freshman year. Like it's crazy what kids here go through.
Yeah. So here's a funny observation is based on my observation through life. Having worked at various companies and yada yada yada. I don't think we end up any differently. I mean, for instance, if you look at where students have gone to college, right? And who are now professors, who are now CEOs, who are now entrepreneurs, who are now what have you, right? They went everywhere. And it seems like everyone just kind of ends up at the same place, which is, well, whether you're working. And so, sure, while on one hand, while maybe a bubble of people who worked really hard and had the summer norms of going to like a Cosmos or ATDP, or
you could still end up
the whole acronym list, right? They end up ending up in the same place as someone who grew up in Indiana, Iowa, Idaho, wherever, Nebraska, didn't have those pressures, were told to pursue their passions, and they end up both, let's say, E5 at Google. Right? because they ended up going where IU, finance, right?
And getting recruited.
Now, granted, one can make the case of, well, those who work harder have greater opportunities, and that is true. In fact, I'm a big fan of work ethic, but at the same time, it's like, what I'm trying to say is, I think we have to be very careful with saying, okay, you have to have this mindset in order to succeed in America.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's true. I think on the flip side of things, we see countless cases of people who didn't grow up in the Bay Area, who had, I would say, I guess, a lot more lax time growing up, who end up in the same places we do. And so,
I agree.
I think that's challenging.
I think the difference is, I think once kids go to college and they're around other people that weren't raised here as well, they get out of that bubble, even if it's 45 minutes away, 30 minutes away. As long as you get out of that bubble and you start meeting people who are different from you, that opens up your view drastically. Yeah. Right. That changes a lot. I mean, college is a very transformative experience, and I think that kids realize that, at least to some degree, that you don't need to be the most stressed out kid to be the most successful.
That's a good way of putting it.
You don't have to flex your stress in order to be the coolest kid around, It's not about, who got the least amount of sleep last night, It's not about that. It's, life is there to be enjoyed.
That's so true.
Have some fun while you're still around.
And so I think that's probably a huge takeaway that you got from going to school outside of this bubble, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And so here's a kind of a comment on the students who don't, though. See, that's the problem, right? It's like the vast majority of students that even like I've mentored over the last 10 years of my life, they've stayed in the same bubble, right? Mm-hmm. And let me kind of change, I guess you can say the angle here a little bit is, I would argue that a student who's incredibly good at the grind is equally deficient in creativity. Let me make the case, because the grind implies that you are very good at conforming, right? Like, for instance, like the very idea of institutional 6 periods a day, right? SAT score and training during a regimen during the summer, all these things. It's very regimented, and so what I've noticed about students like that, generally speaking, is okay. Even though they might be very successful at that, I guess you can say that path or whatever, those kids really struggle when there is no defined path.
Yeah.
Right.
They need that structure.
Right. They need structure. Right. And so, but here's the kicker: is I would argue, especially in today's day and age, if that's good for maybe there are certain people who like structure, and I think as a result of how they were brought up, they always had structure. Yeah. Right. But today's economy, I think, really depends on
you gotta be agile.
Exactly. You need to be agile. You need to be creative. There's a lot of talk about entry-level CS positions, for instance, that are already being automated away, right?
Really?
Yeah, so what can't you automate is creativity.
Exactly.
You can't
human element.
Yeah, exactly. You can't automate creativity.
Exactly.
So for all the students who have kind of stayed in the safe bubble of, let's say, going to school in California, then going to a public university because it was comfortable, it's familiar, right? And they don't do what you did, which is challenge themselves and going to a new bubble, if you will, right? Not only are their worldviews limited, but I would argue that their preparation for life is limited, right? They've almost been kind of like pampered.
I would agree with that.
Even though they got through the grind, if they did, right? I would still argue that they were pampered.
It's a more structured way of life. Someone's always telling you what to do, where to be.
Exactly.
I agree with that. And honestly, like, that's kind of part of the reason, like I said, I wanted to get out. I wanted to see what the rest of the world was like. And honestly, that's kind of what I also enjoyed about studying, like being a business major, is GPA is just like a little like box that they tick, right? Like it's like, you got above a 3.7, cool. Yeah. What else did you do? Right? Like if you've got a 4.0, but no outside activities, you're not part of any clubs, not part of any organizations, it's like, oh, cool, like this kid's smart, but like, can he communicate? Can he do, he may be smart, but will he be able to get that point across?
Yeah.
You know? And it's just kind of a checkbox at that point. You study, you get the grades that you need to, but it's more important what you do, the relationships you form, the experiences that you have are most important, because you need to be able to talk, right?
And I think that's true for even high school.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've been saying this forever, which is like, high school, first and foremost, high school's overrated, college is overrated. From what standpoint? From a numerical standpoint. Because if you think about how generally, like the Bay Area population thinks of high school and college. High school is a means to get to college. College is a means to get to a job.
The workforce, yeah.
Right, is a means to get to money, right? So it's all, and then everything is quantified, right? Like for instance, what is your GPA? What is your SAT score? Okay, then what is the ranking of the college you get to? Ready? Versus then what is the salary you get and the reputation of the job that you just got or the company you just got, right? Be it Facebook, Google, Amazon, what have you, right? So everything seems to be so quantified. What I'm trying to say is that all that stuff is overrated because at the end of the day, like for instance, let me break it down. Your ability to get to a really good college is probably only, at best, I would argue, 50% dependent on your numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea of like the holistic process.
Yeah, but that's the thing is like so many people don't get that. And then so ready, when you get to college, this is the funniest part. I would argue your GPA is almost irrelevant.
Almost
like
completely irrelevant. Yeah, unless you're going for like med school or something like that.
Exactly, unless you're going to med school or law school potentially, right? Where you're
unless you're doing like higher education.
Correct.
Where you're going back into
vast majority not, right? And so it's like, okay, well then what does matter? It's actually the intangibles. And I always say the two things in this order. Who do you know will get you the interview?
Yep.
And what you know will get you the job.
I agree.
Right? And so no one's going to care about what your GPA was. No one's going to care about even what school you went to, right?
Yeah.
Past, I think, the first 2 years of graduating, right? It just comes down to, dude, can you communicate effectively with somebody and make friends and imagine basically going out to dinner or for drinks after work? And if the employer feels that way about you, you're gonna get hired most likely, right? As long as you bring the bare minimum skill set.
So I worked in consulting last summer, and the common litmus test that they use there is what they call the airport test, right? With consulting, you travel a lot. Right?
Yeah.
And naturally, when you travel, you expect delays with your planes.
Yeah.
The airport test is you sit down with a candidate, and you think to yourself, if this kid was on my team and I was stuck in an airport with him for 5 hours, would I go insane?
That's awesome.
Right? And if the answer is no, then all right, you're probably a good culture.
Yeah, you passed the airport.
You've passed the airport test. So that's a good
way of putting it.
Yeah, that's the litmus test that we used to use for that.
So here we go. Let's close this up. Let's wrap this up. So let's say you know what you know now.
Yeah.
Right? You go back in time and you tell the old you, ready? Let's say you're 9th, maybe 10th grade, right? Let's say 9th grade.
Yeah.
You have 5 minutes to talk to yourself. What would you tell yourself?
Honestly, not to take everything so seriously. Just to relax a little bit. And it's funny too, because I gave that advice a couple years ago. I gave that advice to a couple years ago to a family friend of ours whose daughters are in like 9th and 11th grade. And that following school year,
that's awesome.
Her daughter like wasn't studying for tests, and she was like, "Why aren't you studying?" And she was like, "Well, he told me like relax." Like,
oh my gosh!
If you chill out, like it'll all work out. She was not happy. My friend was not happy about that. But honestly, I think it is good advice. Like don't take everything so seriously. You get where you get, and work hard. By no means am I saying not to work hard.
Right,
work hard. Work your butt off.
Right.
But in the end, if you work your butt off and you get a B+ in a class, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It sucks for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's not the end of the world.
Who said the same thing? This is really interesting. This is true. It was I think it was either on The Late Show or Tonight Show, either Colbert or somebody. It was Mark Ruffalo.
Really?
Yeah, and the Hulk, obviously. And he was reflecting on his time in high school. And, believe it or not, nobody really knows Mark during high school, but he was a mess, right?
Really?
Yeah, he was a mess. And I think it was actually Seth, who was it? Whoever, might have been Seth Meyers, and I think he was like, so if he asked the same question, and Mark said the same exact thing you just said. Literally, almost verbatim. He's like, not to take things so seriously, man.
I think that's...
No, verbatim was not to worry so much. Yeah. That's what it was, not to worry so much. And so, that's a great piece of advice. That's so Herculean as a task, though, for a lot of high schoolers. Right?
It is.
Because high schoolers, their world...
Everything feels like it's life and death.
Exactly.
I remember it well. And it's funny too, because I remember reflecting on that when I was a year or two out of high school, and I remember waking up the morning AP scores released and stressing out about whether I got a 3, 4, or 5. And 2 years into college, I'm like, I couldn't tell you any of the scores I got at this point. Yeah. I barely remember my SAT score. I don't know off the top of my head.
That's awesome.
It doesn't matter in the grand scheme.
That's awesome.
It feels like it's life or death in the moment. It does. Awesome. And I know it's super hard. Just be it's okay.
Yeah.
I know that it's hard to back off and say that and try to have that outside point of view, especially when you don't know anything else, right? That's all you know. But I mean, it's true. You know, and I think if students can't do it, I think it might be a good point to try to get across to the parents.
And
if anything.
That's an excellent segue, because I was right about to say that, and I love how you said that. It feels like a matter of life and death. Let me, look, this is kind of a sensitive subject, but I'm going to go into it.
Yeah.
Culture. I think, look, the reason, this is what I've learned in 14 years of now working in education, right? I've learned, almost 15 now, I've learned that students are merely a reflection of their parents. That's it. You know, it is the truth, right? Like, we are just a product of our environment, and obviously our parents play a huge role in that environment, right? In the Bay Area, at least, and also, look, I even work with students in New York, Illinois, Jersey, obviously India, China, Bahrain, all over the world, but like even recently with like students in Texas, right? I've learned that it is a matter of life and death. Here's why. It's because I think, especially for predominantly Chinese and Indian parents, right? They came from a world where literally your life depended on a test.
Yeah. Those systems are way different.
There was no holistic review.
Yeah.
There was no ECs. It was just an SAT on steroid of steroids of steroids, right? And if you got a certain score, or you were in a certain percentile,
you could get it
was the difference between becoming a doctor, an engineer, or a janitor.
Right.
You know? And for them, they bring that mindset back here, not with any malice intent, but that mindset is here. It's all they know. It's all they know, and it's all love. That's the truth, right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
But here's the problem, right? This is a different world, and so when they are trying to help their kids, and they're forcing upon their kids basically the same standard, the same mindset, right? It's really sad to see, because one, the parent doesn't understand how college admissions actually works, which is a holistic process, but they force it upon their kids as if it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of kids who kind of equate life to how well I can do on the SAT, or how many APs I can take and get all A's, right? They start equating their own life and their value to that, and the parents are just coaching them and saying, yeah, this is exactly what you need to do, when in reality, it's not.
And the problem is, because everyone here is like that, it just creates that echo chamber where nobody does anything different, and if anyone does, they get judged the hell out of it.
Exactly. And that's what leads to toxicity, right? And so, you know, I think we like, I have to call it out. I mean, you know, call a spade a spade. I think a lot of the toxicity that's created in the overpressures, and even, I'll be honest, depression, anxiety, even suicide, right? As we see Mission San Jose high, gun high.
And we've had so many clusters,
It's crazy. I mean, that's not some anomaly. That's a pattern, right? And I think it's a pattern as a result of the toxicity. It's a pattern as a result of this life and death mentality that if you get to Berkeley, then you're alive, and if you don't, you're dead.
Yeah.
And I think some kids, they literally feel this way so literally that they literally take their lives if they feel like that's jeopardized.
Yeah, right? And it's even worse because all of your friends are held to the same standard. So you also feel like you need to stack up with your own friends. You know? Like it's tough. It really is.
So perhaps to really kind of sum it up, I guess what I get, I feel this combination of emotions whenever a kid in the ninth grade. This is the most disturbing like moment for me, and I've been doing this line of work for a long time. This still disturbs me, and it's been happening more and more lately, by the way. Ninth grader comes up to me during one of the first meetings I have with a student, and they'll say, "Okay, great. So how important or how can I get an internship this summer?"
You're 14. 14 years old.
They're like, how can I get it? First and foremost, I'm like, yo, you're asking them, like, whoa, like, who put that in your head?
Man.
You know? And I'm just like, what is going on right now? I'm like, college students have a hard time getting internships.
Yeah.
You just started high school. Like, you need to just relax and just grow up and be a kid.
It's crazy because they're trying to accelerate all the stuff we did so that they can do even more. Because I feel like that standard just goes up and up every year.
As you mentioned, it's happening. And so it's crazy. But I guess it's what Mark Ruffalo said. It's what you said, right? Don't worry too much, right? Don't take things too seriously. And I think, honestly, like conversations like this, I think help, right? Because I think students don't usually hear that.
Yeah, and I think
they usually do the exact opposite, right? And so, I mean, that's the reason why we have you here, man. It's respect, man. Respect for coming on and just
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
being that voice, you know? I mean, it's crazy. It's the same thing I've realized too, but yeah, man. I mean, anything else in your mind? Any questions you have for me, I guess, or whatever? I mean, anything, really.
Oof.
Yeah.
Let's see. I wasn't expecting that.